All right, guys. Our next guest is one of the busiest people in MMA. He's an ESPN analyst, World Series of Fighter commentator, successful podcaster, T-shirt mogul, and now he brings his own submission underground grappling series to Flow Combat. The American Gangster himself, Chael Sonnen. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
Gentlemen, good to be here.
It is always great when you come on. Thank you so much for coming on the program. We know how busy you are, so we'll jump straight into it. Chael, last weekend, Fedor Emelianenko had a difficult performance against Fabio Maldonado. Many disagreed with the decision. When we saw you tweeted out, "Bum," what did you make of the fight?
You know, Maldonado, I thought, should have won that fight. It should have been stopped in the very first round. In a best-case scenario, Fedor ends up with the draw. I think there's good reason to believe that Fedor won rounds 2 and 3. But, I mean, look, if the first round wasn't a 10-8, then 10-8 just doesn't exist. It should have been stopped. It was corrupt. The entire thing was corrupt. And that's what you get when you go to Russia. I was a little surprised that Maldonado had his feelings hurt. I think Maldonado's the only guy in the world that thought he was going to get a fair shake in Russia.
People aren't as keen on seeing Fedor in the UFC after that performance. Do you think Dana White will still pursue him to have a couple of fights with the company?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Fedor is gonna come over to the UFC. There's nobody on the roster that he could beat, and I don't think there's anybody that he wants to fight. He's pretty clear in what his business plan is, which is to go out and fight the easiest guy possible and keep the mystique going. And it's not a bad plan. That's actually not meant to be a knock on him. He's selling tickets and drawing attendance and getting away with it. But yeah, I mean, the UFC is a whole nother deal. But if somebody wants to see Fedor get beat up, it is what it is.
Well, let me ask you this, Chael. If he does go over to the UFC, if the UFC says, all right, we want to bring in Fedor, what is in it for the UFC themselves? Because we've spoken to you in the past about Fedor. Is he a draw? Is he not a draw? What does this UFC get out of this?
Yeah, I think they finally got to have Fedor. I think it just was a goal, something they wanted to do. He's not going to be a terrible draw, but he's not going to do great. I mean, if he's asking for a reasonable number, if he wants $200,000 or $250,000 to show up, I think that pencils. If he wants the $5 million, that he could have had before and did not take, well, yeah, he might as well just light that money on fire. But I don't know what the UFC has. The UFC does get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes, they live in a bubble. All of us do. You guys, all of us that are in this industry, we live in a bubble, and we don't always see outside of it. Fedor is a big name in the bubble. Mm-hmm. It's just a reality that people don't know who he is. Now, that would have changed years ago. It wasn't because he didn't have the skills. It was just, if you don't fight in the UFC, people just simply don't know who you are in North America. It's a North American company. If he could have got that clock started years ago, I wouldn't be making these statements. He would have been a big name. But the reality is, the average person in America just doesn't know who he is.
Well, it's not 2009 anymore, but would you still be interested in seeing him fight Brock Lesnar if it ever came together in the future in the UFC?
Yeah, we'll see. And I'm one of those guys that lives in the bubble. Mm-hmm. So everything I tell you about Fedor, it sounds like I'm real negative on him. The reality is I want to see him fight because I live in that bubble. I tune in to see him fight any one of those guys, and I don't make believe that he's going to beat them, but I think he brings something to the table. I think that he brings a presence. I want to see him make that walk, get in the octagon. I want to see him do the whole bit. So, yeah, there's no doubt I'd tune in to see him. Against anybody, we just have to be Brock. You throw in 100 different names. I'm buying it, but I'm in that bubble. I still have to be cognizant of the fact that the little old lady in Iowa turning on her TV to FS1 doesn't know who in the hell he is.
I can just picture that little old lady watching Fedor make his UFC debut. Now, Chael, we want to quickly discuss UFC 200, in particular Brock Lesnar making his big return against Mark Hunt. Striking and his reaction to punches has always been, heavily criticized. Are you surprised Lesnar agreed to this fight?
Yes, I was, but pleasantly. I'm impressed. Lesnar came out and did an interview with Paul Heyman. I took it as close to a shoot as you were going to get, as close to the real Brock as you were going to get. And Paul asked him, "Why are you doing this?" And he just said, "I want to." He said, "I didn't leave the way I wanted to. I didn't have the performance I wanted to. And it's not about winning or losing. It's going out and performing to the best of my abilities, and I didn't do that." And I get it. As an athlete that's also retired, you do think about those things. That's true. You do think, well, I could have done better that night, or maybe I didn't warm up this way, or maybe this happened the night before that wasn't the best me. And those are the things that that keep you up when you think about your own competitive career. So, I believed him, and I like it, and I respect it, and the fact that he's stepping in there with such a hard opponent, good for him. Brock's never taken the easy way. That's one thing about that son of a bitch. He's never had an easy fight.
No, he's had a whole bunch of difficult fights. So it is interesting that he's going with this one. We have to ask Chael, how do you see this going? Because a lot of people are saying Hunt's going to go in there and knock him out. But then at the other side of the coin, he's a really good wrestler. And on the ground, he may have the advantage. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, and, he wasn't a really good wrestler. He was an effective wrestler. I'll put this in perspective for you. In the NCAA, when he won his national title, he was 265 pounds, which was the limit. In the finals, he had a guy that was 220 pounds, and he had to go into double overtime with him. There's not very many wrestlers alive, if any, that if they had a 45-pound weight advantage, couldn't put that guy away in about 30 seconds. So he was an effective wrestler, but, he had some size, and he had a lot of things on it, a lot of other things that helped to get his hand raised. It wasn't skill and technique. He kept good position. He was a good competitor. And he achieved some really great things. So I don't think that a guy as short as Hunt is just going to get bum rushed and taken down. You got to understand, Brock hasn't been in the ring in 5 years. Hunt was the number one contender within the last calendar year. So, no, you don't have to exactly be an MMA expert to be able to see how this fight goes. Hunt's going to wreck him. But Brock's still stepping in there. And, he's a once-in-a-lifetime attraction. If Brock's fighting, you don't want to miss it. And this truly will be his last fight. Anytime there's speculation, is this going to be the guy's last fight? That helps to draw. That helps to make you, I don't want to miss it if it's the last one. Well, for sure, this is Brock's last fight. So, yeah, man, people want to see it. I'm one of those people.
Just curious. So if Brock Lesnar wins, do you think there's any chance he fights again? Or do you think that's it anyway, even if he does beat Mark Hunt decisively?
No, he's done either way, but a win would make that even stronger, right? Either way, he's only getting in there this one last time. But with a win, yes, he could ride off, he could hold his head high, he could never have to look back. That's how a fighter wants to go out. It's very, very, very rare that a fighter gets to go out on a win. Usually it's a losing streak, and you call it a career. St. Pierre, in fact, is the only guy that comes to mind that was able to go out with a victory. So, no, if he was able to beat Mark Hunt, if he was able to get him down and keep him there and do damage enough to win the contest, that would help him go out with a positive feeling. Either way, he's going out, but he could go out with a positive feeling if that happened.
You mentioned George St. Pierre, and I want to get to him in 2 seconds, but before we do, you've spoken about McGregor has long been the biggest draw in MMA, but do you believe Lesnar is bigger than both McGregor and Rousey when he makes his comeback at UFC 200?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this, but Rousey was never the draw that she was advertised as. She never did the pay-per-view numbers or the live gates that was advertised. It was always Conor, by a lot. During that era where there was a debate between those two, that Conor was the money guy, and why it was promoted and marketed differently, I don't know, but it was just that it was promotion and marketing. It was not reality. And yes, Lesnar crushes them both. They're not even comparable. When you talk about the biggest UFC of all time and the biggest, you never bring up UFC 100. It was such an anomaly. It's like it's taken off the board. They did 1.75 million. So, yes, Lesnar, without a doubt, is the biggest attraction the UFC's ever seen.
Well, you mentioned GSP before. As everybody by now knows, he was on the MMA hour and gave the impression that he'd like to make a comeback against Michael Bisping. Just wondering, what was your reaction on the news, and does the fight between Bisping and GSP make sense to you, Chael?
I loved it. I want to see George back in there. I didn't think it would happen when he turned down UFC 200, particularly the way that his contract and the thresholds and the bonus structure works. He was looking at anywhere from $12 to $15 million. Now he's going to be looking more at $4 to $5.3 million. So I was a little surprised that if he turned down 200, why or if he would ever come back. And I still don't have the answer to that. I still think that the card to come back for was UFC 200, but he didn't do it. So, if he wants to come back, I'm all for it. And if he wants a title shot with Bisping, he's going to get it.
I mean, that'd be a big fight. Who do you believe wins that one? And if GSP wins, does it make sense for him to be the middleweight champion of the world?
Yeah, I think that GSP would win, and does it make sense? Sure, it does. It's a very rare thing, and again, it might be a one-off. I don't know that he would defend that belt. I think that he likes the matchup, he likes that opponent, he likes that it's a world title fight in a different division. I think he likes those things. I don't know that he wants to get in there with Rockhold and Jacare. I don't know that he does, but he likes this, and history will reflect very well on it if he was to come out of retirement and win a world championship in a different weight class.
Well, this puts you in an interesting position. Currently, the middleweight champion is a man who you beat in Michael Bisping. If you return to MMA, would you be interested in pursuing the middleweight title and fighting Bisping, or even GSP potentially if he's the champion?
I wouldn't give a damn either way. Whoever the opponent is. I think only bullies pick their opponents. I think that, if you're going to be in that sport, and this is my own code, everybody lives by a code, but mine was anyone, anywhere, anytime. And if I was competing or back in my career, that was always the rule that I want to change. I do not care about the opponent.
So just to clarify, Tim Kennedy, you had some back and forth between yourself and him. He's another guy that you would potentially face if you were hypothetically to return as well?
Yeah. I mean, there wouldn't be anybody off the table. I'm not coming back. I don't think that it's a pro. You talk about living by a code. I also follow the rule. I'd say whatever I wanted about a guy, but I would always walk in there and let that guy answer for it if he had a problem with it. So, I'm not in that pool anymore. I'm not going to walk in there and answer for it. So, I'm a little torn. But to answer your question in a hypothetical matter, yes, Tim, you could add Tim Kennedy to the list.
With all this craziness with Conor McGregor rematching Diaz, with Lesnar coming back, you're not saying that a part of you sort of misses the action, considering you were the biggest draw in the game when you were around?
Yes, I miss it a lot. I miss it every day. I was a wrestler before MMA. I still think about college wrestling matches and high school wrestling matches, that keep me up at night, all the way back to kids wrestling. Yeah, you think about that stuff. Once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I get jealous and envious, and I fantasize about it all the time, like I did before I was even in the UFC. But I don't think that's going to go away. I think that's just the way it goes. I talk to Randy Couture a lot. Same thing. He thinks about it too. And wish I would have done this different, or what would have happened if I tried this. There's just all these things that go through your head. But I think that's just the life, man. I don't think you ever come to terms with it.
Well, the good thing is, as a fan, obviously you'll be there covering UFC 200, so you'll be able to see it up close. But after the smoke from UFC 200 settles, fans can look forward to another major event in your new Submission Underground series, which is exclusive to Flow Combat, which, by the way, is a fantastic site. And this one features Jake Shields versus Benson Henderson. Actually, sorry, Chris Lytle is stepping in for Benson Henderson. King Mo versus Vinny Magalesh, and Kenny Florian and Jens Pulver also on the card. Tell us, Chael, what can fans expect from this show?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great event. It's live and free to any member of FlowCombat.com. It's 8-minute grappling matches with EBI rules. We've got some of the biggest names. We're going to find out who the best grappler alive is, and it's going to be a process. But everybody's welcome. It's not invite only. There's nothing keeping guys out. Anybody that thinks he's the best grappler alive, we will begin the process and we will figure it out. We'll crown him champion.
I mean, you've been a part of Metamoris. What gave you the idea to do the show and partner with Flow Combat and, as you say, make grappling great again?
Yeah, I love Metamoris. I wish I was wrestling a Metamoris event this weekend. It was a great event. It was a lot of fun, and there's not a lot of opportunity for grapplers. And in this space, MMA fans trump grappling fans 10-1. But in participation, there's 10 times more people that grapple than that do MMA. I belong to a gym. We've got 100+ grapplers. We've only got 6 guys that are MMA fighters. So, they just need opportunity. They just need an opportunity to compete, and that's really all we're bringing. When you team up with Flow, you're bringing all the bells and whistles and videos and promotion, which can make things fun for the athletes. But at the end of the day, it's just somewhere to compete. If you either want to do it or you don't. And if you do, we've got a place. And if you don't, that's all right too.
It's going to be exciting. So, guys, make sure to check it out. Now, Chael, before we let you go, I mean, this just got confirmed just the other day. CM Punk is now officially going to be on UFC 203 against Mickey Gall. A quick prediction. How do you think his UFC debut goes now that it's official?
I'd like to see Punk do really well. I know this is a dream of his. He's worked really hard. He sacrificed. He dedicated. He put into it. I'd like to see him do really well. But I think the same thing can be said for his opponent. Those guys will go out and have their match, and we'll see if it happens. I'm not ready to sign off that I believe that that's going to happen, but I did read the article, and let's see if it does.
The part of you thinks it still might not happen, Chael.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of moving parts there. There's a lot of moving parts. There's been opportunities before, and the match hasn't happened. Let's see. Let's just see if it does.
All right, Joe. Well, we cannot wait to see what happens. Guys, make sure to check out the exclusive live stream of Submission Underground, July 17th on Flow Combat. And for all the Aussie and New Zealand listeners, don't forget that is July 18th due to the time difference here. And make sure to check out Chael's podcast, You're Welcome, on Podcast One, as well as his excellent t-shirts at badguyinc.com. As always, Chael, pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for returning to the program.
Gentlemen, take care.